What's up, readers? Hey, so last time we talked about your perspective about a character and how that sometimes is what truly changes and not the character changing. And that really is that trickeration, the writing skill of the author that twists it, that allows us to get that sort of payoff of I thought a character was one way, but my perspective changes and I actually realize they were different than I thought they were, even though they were that character the whole time. Well, today we're going to find out that authors have more tricks up their sleeve. In fact, often what writers can do is they can control your sympathy for the main character and characters in the book by holding back inner thinking from you. Let's check it out. Okay, so we're going to be talking about inner thinking today because that is the main tool that writers can use or authors can use to decide, not trick. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with deciding who gets the inner thinking. But whoever gets most of it, it's going to be easy for us as the reader to sympathize with them. Just like the ones who get the least amount of inner thinking are the hardest to sympathize with. And I'm sure that there are friends in your life where that inner thinking becomes something they share with you. And I know that those people, those are the ones that are easiest to sympathize with. We understand them. We communicate with them. But those who we don't have a connection with, I bet you could think back and say, yeah, they haven't shared those things that I wonder are rattling around inside their brain. And it's the same thing with writing and reading and the books that we ingest. So let's go back to our read aloud about the hoop court, and we'll see the inner thinking that's going on and what the writer has been showing us. So we're going to start with the part of the story where our main character has wandered into the living room and he has decided he's going to ask his dad if he can wake up in the mornings with him and drive him to the Balboa gym, the Muni gym in Balboa Park. As I'm reading, will you consider which character you sympathize with more? Wander in to your cramped living room after dinner that night. Work up the guts to describe to your old man the importance of competing against the best. You've outgrown your local run. It's time to put a foot in the deep end. So, what if he doesn't even know the rules of the game? If all he does is sit there silently inside the TV, working a toothpick in his teeth. So what do you think, Pop? About what? Would it be cool if I went with you to work every morning so I could play some ball down there? He'll look at you suspiciously, then turn back to his cop show and his toothpick. You'll take this as a no and assume the fate of the most important summer of your hoop development now rests in the hands of your county bus system. Okay. Tell your partner which one you sympathize with more. Then try to figure out why. And I've already given you some hints as to why. Pause the video now. Pause the video, pause the video, pause the video, pause the video. So I'm sure that in our initial thinking, even if we didn't go into whose inner thinking we had access to, the dad sounds a lot harsher than the boy does. So it's probably a reason we thought why we would sympathize with the boy. The dad just sounds a little bit mean. But let's look closer. What does the text actually show us as far as inner thinking goes? First of all, he says he's working up the guts to ask his dad. So that means we know he's nervous. When you have to work up the courage or guts, it means you're nervous about something. So we already see that inner thinking from him. Not to mention, like, he makes this seem like it's his life hanging in the balance. And I quote, he calls it the fate of his hoop development. And when we've talked about this story before, we realized that he thought this was the only way out of where he lived, the only way to escape where he was growing up, in that room that he shared with his sister. Meanwhile, what do we know about the dad? I mean, we don't really get to access his inner thinking, so we kind of have to guess. Based upon what we already know about him, I mean, he works all day, he wakes up early. He's probably thinking, boy, I'm tired. Why does this matter? It's just basketball. He might even be thinking, like, since we already know how he dealt with the police officer in the story, he might be thinking, like, that's not a Mexican neighborhood. Why would you want to go there? Good things aren't going to happen when you go there. I mean, we already know how he feels about the police, even though, like, that's not necessarily how everyone feels. That's his perspective that we found out about the police. All that to say, the author doesn't give us access to the dad's inner thinking. Therefore, sympathy is hard to come by for the dad. So let's kind of recount the steps for how I did that. First was, we looked back at the text and we asked ourselves, with whom do we sympathize most? Number 2, why? Why do we sympathize with them? To do that, we looked more closely at the text, where the author may have not given us access to inner thinking, or did give us access to inner thinking. Finally, you could say this is 3 or 4. Let's call it 3. We thought to ourselves, what if they had given us access to their inner thinking? That was when we were pretending how the dad might be thinking in the situation. And honestly, if we had had that made up thinking, I think we would be a little more sympathetic, maybe even a lot more sympathetic. Okay, we have time for you now to engage with your book and your partner. So I want you to share with your partner now, thinking about the characters in your book, choose one of them and decide, do you sympathize with them or not? Then you're going to ask why. You're going to go back at the book and look, do you have access to their inner thinking? If not, imagine how they might be thinking in some of the situations from before. So you might have to look back at parts you've already read. In fact, that's what you should be doing. Go ahead and pause the video and talk to your partner about that character, why you sympathize based upon what we're seeing in the book. Or maybe don't sympathize. Sympathize. Pause the video, pause the video, pause the video, pause the video. Okay, readers, hopefully you were able to share something. Maybe you weren't quite sure why you sympathize or don't sympathize with a character. For right now in your stories, having to answer so quickly with your partners, I bet it was easier to find one of your characters and say, oh, I don't sympathize with them because I don't have access to their inner thinking. That's pretty obvious and easy to see. Those are normally some of those minor characters, or if it's a first-person story, point of view, we've talked about it, you probably don't know the inner thinking of, like, thinking of Harry Potter. We don't know Malfoy's thinking. Pretty hard to sympathize with him. So, with that said, I expect that in your assignment, you're going to have a lot deeper thinking about your characters and your sympathy for them or lack thereof than you shared with your partners. So make sure you spend those 30 minutes of reading time wisely today in your book, learning more about your characters and noticing, do you have access from the author to their inner thinking, and how does that affect your sympathy for them? Okay, writers. Till I see you next time, happy reading.